Last year's winter was quite exceptional for many. In fact, in the month of January, we had multiple major storms that impacted the Midwest and the deep south of the United States, including one that impacted much of the Gulf Coast with up to 10 inches of snow, including up to 6 inches in downtown New Orleans proper. However, as time goes on and as we're approaching that time of year again, we need to talk about this winter. We've seen some forecasts talking about this potentially being a historic winter. We've seen some forecasts saying that this may not be much at all. In fact, by the time you're seeing this, you might be seeing your first snow, especially for those tuning in the Chicago area. So here in today's video, I'm going to be breaking down what our winter weather forecast is going to be looking like, and how we're going to do this is we're going to break this into 3 components. Who's going to get a white Christmas, what regions are going to be the most impacted, and ultimately how much snow could you guys get. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and dive right into it. Alright, so starting off right here, we have satellite imagery. By the time a lot of you guys see this, Chicago is going to be under a lot of snowfall. They're having a pretty big lake effect band at the time of me recording this video. It's still potentially going to be ongoing for some people that are going to be affected by the time the video goes out. But before we get into the hodgepodge of the forecast, I want to start with some climatology and kind of go through the basics and give a general idea of what's going on. Starting off, we are expected to have a La Nina winter. For those of you who do not know what ENSO is, or El Nino or La Nina, essentially El Nino is warmer temperatures than average in parts of the Pacific, and La Nina is colder temperatures than expected for parts of the Central Pacific, particularly off the coast of South America. Why am I talking about South America when I'm talking about winter weather? Well, because of those cold temperatures, because of those warm temperatures, those end up having a profound effect on weather in the United States. For example, a La Nina could potentially mean a more extreme winter for some people, and an El Nino could mean a warmer winter but more extreme for others. For example, 2016. Essentially what happened was we had a lot of snowfall happen in parts of the east coast of the United States, and not very much across much of the country with the exception of the mountains and parts of California. A La Nina year would typically be more favorable for snowfall along the Midwest, along the Great Plains, and even in parts of the Upper South and in parts of the West Coast as well. So that's kind of the rundown of why we're talking about this. La Nina means colder temperatures than expected in the United States. El Nino means warmer temperatures than expected in the United States. That's just the general rundown of it, because this is going to get too complicated if I talk about it much longer. And taking a quick look at the ocean charts, I want to go ahead and show you guys this. We're actually in a pretty strong La Nina right now across much of the ENSO. You're looking at the surface temperature analysis, much colder than average across much of the Pacific, as a matter of fact. In fact, if you take a quick look at this, we're already, for regions 3 and 4, well over 1.16 degrees Celsius below average. In order to trigger a La Nina, you need to get to negative 0.5 degrees below average or lower, pretty much. Negative 0.5 or lower is what you need to trigger a La Nina. Obviously, region 3 and 4 has been under this threshold for quite some time. Let's go ahead and go to regions 1 and 2. As you can see, we're already down at that threshold right here. We've been on this threshold for quite a while, but we're down to below 1 degree. We're down to minus 1 degrees below average right here, 1.01. That's going to trigger a La Nina for you guys right there. And what this is going to mean is, at least climatologically, we are expecting at least potentially a colder than average winter across many portions of the United States. But that also could mean potentially a little bit more severe weather for other parts of the United States that typically get. The Deep South, for example, this is their severe weather season. Whereas typically the severe weather season we talk about happens in April, May, June. October, November, December, January, February is when the South gets their severe weather season, because at that point the jet gets down to them a lot faster. You get the general idea of what I'm talking about right here. But now what we're going to do here is we're going to kind of break down, now that we've gotten some climatology out of the way, we have the basics down, let's talk about first who is the most likely to get a white Christmas. With that, we're going to go ahead and go to some forecast models right here. Here is the College of DuPage models right here. This is going to be our friend for the next few months. But essentially what we're looking at with these models right here, these are more short-term forecasts, but essentially we're going to play around with these a little bit, as well as look at some climatological models as well, just to get a general idea of who is the most likely going to get a white Christmas. The first thing I can answer pretty easily is if you are in the mountains over here in this part of the United States, or even in the Appalachian regions right here, or pretty much parts of New England, you guys are most likely going to get a white Christmas, especially in the upper elevations. That we can talk about right there. But in regards to maybe somewhere in the Great Plains or in the Midwest where it's a bit more complex, we can kind of run down what may be happening over there. So with that, we're going to go ahead and turn over to our climate models. All right, so what I have pulled up for you guys is the CANCIPS model. And the CANCIPS model, this is for December actually. This is their forecast as of November 1st. For December, they're already calling for a pretty below average temperature gradient. This is based on 2-meter temperature anomalies. Below average, we're looking at potentially up to 3 degrees below average in some parts of the Midwest in the United States, as well as parts of New England getting a little bit warmer, about maybe -1.5, so not as big of an anomaly. But also in parts of the South, I do think is interesting, generally stays around or just above average, whereas parts in the southwestern United States is actually quite a bit above average right here. So you can kind of eliminate based on what we're seeing right here, who's going to get snow and who's not. Also, considering the fact that you're looking at this model right here, you can generally get an idea as to where colder temperatures are going to be and who's going to be in for a pretty chilly December, first of all. Now, how this translates to snow, well, temperature kind of equates to this. Whenever you get precipitation, it either falls as rain, hail, sleet, snow, or pretty much somewhere in between. The temperatures that you need to look at are very interesting. Here's the general rundown of this. If it's above 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius, you're going to see a situation where you're not going to see snow accumulate. That's your freezing line between rain and snow. Now, if you go below that, that means you're going to see snowfall. If you go above that, you're going to see rainfall. That's the general basics that we have for you in regards to snowfall. And this isn't meant to be like a meteorology lesson or anything like that. I just wanted to run this down for you. But where those cold temperatures set up in the atmosphere are also key. For example, if you see a situation where the temperatures are below freezing on the surface, but maybe are warmer above in the atmosphere, you're going to see a situation where maybe the snow falls, it melts, turns into rain, and then refreezes into sleet or freezing rain, or depending on how low that warm layer is. So that's your general basics of it. This is just your temperature anomalies at the surface. I want to go ahead and go a little bit up and a little bit further up to your 850 millibar temperature anomalies. Definitely seems a bit more concentrated for sure along the Midwest and the northeastern part of the United States over here. But still, the point stands. You're generally seeing a pretty stacked environment regarding your temperature anomalies, and that's going to be pretty key as well. Height anomalies also are going to play quite a bit of a role as well, because height anomalies, essentially, that is another indicator. So your key for the amount of snowfall you would need is your 500 millibar heights would have to be at or below 5,400 meters. That's about 18,000 feet up in the atmosphere. So so on average, if the lower your heights are at the atmosphere, the more likely you could see snow on the ground. So taking a quick look at this right here, December, definitely looking at your lower heights in parts of Canada and in parts of Wisconsin and Michigan, but also bleeding into some parts of the United States as well. So essentially, what we can boil all of this down to is the temperatures look pretty good for some snowfall, especially among parts of the Midwest and in parts of New England as well, and even maybe in parts of this Mid-Atlantic as well. Just depends on what the temperatures are going on. Now the main question we need to look at is, what is our precipitation values going to look like? Here's your monthly precipitation anomalies for you guys right here, and what we're looking at potentially, according to the CanSIPs, is maybe a drier than average start to the winter, especially in December for parts of the United States. Around average expected for parts of the Great Plains, parts of the upper Midwest, in those areas, but mainly a drier than average winter across much of the Midwest and New England. That doesn't mean snow is not going to happen. No, it just means that we're not seeing as much precipitable water, or at least in total accumulated precipitation. This is not particularly a big anomaly. This is only about, I'd say, 1 inch below average right here, but if it gets to around 2 or 3 inches below average, that's when it becomes a bit more of a concern. But 1 inch either way is the standard deviation. So call this a slightly below average rainfall according to the CanSIPs for December. That's what I would put it at as well. You're looking at your 3-month anomalies as well. Kind of paints a better picture a little bit as well, but still, you are still going to get quite a bit of precip from this regardless. It just really depends on what your low pressure system's at that point, but the climatology does look somewhat decent for some snowfall. Now, in terms of where it's most likely, I would say that that based on these maps and based on this forecast right here, where the cold temperatures are going to set, where the precip's going to set up, I would say as of right now, the most likely area for a white Christmas would be, especially in the mountains, with the exception of the mountains, probably in the Great Plains. That's pretty expected at this point, and parts of the Midwest and in parts of New England. In terms of how far south that line may go, I would say draw that line pretty much, I would say, from outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, all the way through parts of Ohio, Indiana, where my cursor is going, through parts of Illinois into Missouri, pretty much where this line is right here. Am I saying it's possible? It's impossible below that line? No. But I would say it becomes increasingly unlikely south of St. Louis, and especially becomes unlikely after you get down to like Louisville and those areas as well. But I would say things can happen. You never know with weather at this point, but I would say the most likely areas for a white Christmas this year definitely is further to the south climatologically, and is definitely better for parts of the Midwest than it was in previous years, based on the height anomalies, based on the temperature anomalies in those areas as well, especially like in areas like southern Illinois, like even in parts of central Indiana, Ohio, that don't typically get much snowfall throughout the year. I would say it's more likely for you guys this year than it was last year, but as of right now, I would say your chances of a white Christmas south of the St. Louis and Indianapolis, south of I-70, while they have increased compared to last year, I would argue that they haven't increased by that much because of that precip anomaly. But still, I think you have a better chance of a white Christmas this year than you did last year or even 2 years ago, in my opinion. For those of you living in the Great Plains, the Midwest, and and New England. I don't know everything. This is just based off of some climatology models. This is just very limited data that we have for you right here. A lot can change, but that's kind of my preliminary forecast in terms of a white Christmas. Now, in terms of the regions that we're looking at, things will get a bit more interesting going forward. Let's go ahead and start off and move to parts of New England. Let's go ahead and start there and then work our way to the west. We did this last year. We're going to go ahead and do this again this year. So here's what we had for you guys in New England. Let's see, sub-regional sectors. Actually, sub-regional sectors. Probably this won't be probably the regional sectors will probably be the best one to go to, but here's what we have for you guys right here. For parts of New England, in terms of your winter weather, I would say that because of the La Nina and because of the ENSO region that's going on, I would say that you guys, with the exception of those in the mountains and like upstate New York and areas like that, like areas along the coast, you're definitely less likely to see snowfall, more likely to see rainfall compared to what we potentially an El Nino type situation, or even compared to what we saw last year. At this current point, I would say that your odds of snow if you're in Philadelphia, New York City, Boston, Washington, D.C., definitely decrease compared to what we see last year, but you still could see some pretty powerful nor'easters as well, but the rain snow line that everyone talks about right here, that's going to kind of mainly be the main thing we pay attention to. And going to the northeastern US over here, just to kind of show you that and kind of give you an illustration as to what I'm talking about right here. So let's go ahead and use this frame for example. And if let's say the rain snow line on average is pretty much where my cursor is moving right here, kind of pretty much that line that I just showed right here with my cursor where my little plus is. I would say that you'd shift that back, I'd say a good 30-40 miles or so, and I would say this year that rain snow line on average will generally be about here, which will put New York, Boston, Philly, and DC, as well as Baltimore out of the line of fire. But ultimately, that's what we're looking at. Probably more snowfall to the north and more rainfall further to the south. That rain snow line definitely gets pushed up. And I know it's a huge talking point in a lot of areas in Pennsylvania, New York, Boston, and those areas. It's, at least in terms of the climatology, it's going to be a bit further to the north than average that we've seen this year. And I know it's been shifting further and further and further to the north on average, but given the La Nina and given just the fact that we're going to be seeing potentially less moisture this season, I would say that at this current point in time for that part of the United States, I would expect some pretty strong winter storms, but they're going to set up more so along closer to the coast of the United States and push more of the snow inland and not as much snow towards the coast. So that's kind of my forecast for you guys in parts of New England right here. I would say that Philadelphia, New York, Boston, your snow totals definitely are going to most likely decrease. I'd say probably for those in Boston, maybe you'd probably get on total maybe like a good, I don't know, maybe like 20 inches of snow throughout the entire year. But that is quite a bit. Quite a bit of a liberal estimate right there. It just depends on the rain snow line, but I would say your chances of getting like 6+ inches per snowstorm, or even 4+ inches per snowstorm along the cities, definitely decrease this year compared to what we see last year. And I would not be as concerned over there unless we see a pretty big cold snap like we've seen with forecasted this year. We do actually have some good temperatures and all of that, but given the La Nina and the climatology favoring more of a Midwest snowstorm setup, I would say that areas along the coast of New England will definitely be more so in the rain side of the rain snow line this year. So that's what we're seeing in parts of New England. Now shifting down to the south right here, we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about this. So the south is going to be pretty interesting. The south doesn't typically get much winter weather. The exception was last year where we had two very big snowstorms across much of the region. For example, we had one hitting in early January in Tennessee and another one in mid-January to late January hitting the Gulf Coast. But essentially, those were the exceptions and not the rule. What I will say, though, is a La Nina definitely would favor a stronger severe weather season than average this year for you guys. Mainly because you're going to see the trough sticking down a bit more. You're going to see more cooling coming in from Canada. That's going to add to the instability as well based on the climatology. And also, you're going to have to consider the fact that you could see some more wind shear as well because of these pressure gradients, so you're going to want to pay attention to it. It's impossible to predict how many severe weather outbreaks is going to happen in parts of the Deep South this year. It's incredibly difficult to do that in the first place, but I would say your severe weather outbreaks will definitely be stronger than average, and we will keep you updated on that here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But that's kind of the general forecast. Do I see much snowfall happening in parts of the South? I would say outside of maybe Tennessee, Arkansas, and even North Carolina, I would say down further south of there, I would say probably not, unless it's like a dusting. However, there is one thing we do need to talk about, and that is icing, because those gradients, the rain snow line, especially in the Midwest, those gradients are a lot longer because essentially in the atmosphere, there are some warm slots that may develop in areas higher up in the atmosphere. but essentially it gets cold and it gets below freezing at the surface, and that could trigger some freezing rain, potentially some sleet if that freezing line develops further higher up. But essentially, what we have going right there is I do think the risk for ice storms, especially in parts of the upper south, definitely does increase quite a bit, because you're going to see more snowstorms affecting parts of the Midwest this year. That's kind of my prediction. Spoiler alert to those of you tuning in from there. I do see more icing potential happening in much of the region over there, primarily because of that pressure gradient and primarily because of that temperature gradient I was talking about earlier as well. Because if we go ahead and show you the CANSIPS model right here, taking a quick look at the dynamics of it right here, let's take a look at the temperature anomalies. You're looking at a colder than average temperature in January and February 2026 over here in parts of the Midwest, and a warmer than average anomaly in parts of the deep south right here. That a combination right there is ultimately going to be favorable for more ice storms right here, especially if you look at the 850 dynamics, where you're looking at cooler than average temperatures of the surface, but maybe warmer than average temperatures up or aloft. That's going to be more favorable for icing, especially along parts of the south. Even in parts of Missouri, Kentucky, in southern Illinois, that would definitely be more favorable for you guys over there. But I would say you're for the deep south and especially the southeastern United States, your chances of ice storms definitely increases quite a bit based on these climatological data. But we can't say for certain what exactly is going to happen with severe weather. That's your main threat for you guys right there. I do think the severe weather threat is going to be a larger than average this year based on those warmer anomalies and the fact that we are seeing colder temperatures penetrating parts of the Midwest, and that added instability is going to allow for potentially more stronger low-pressure systems and allow for potentially more shear, especially as those troughs start to really dig down towards the deep south and cause some more outbreaks. Now we're going to go ahead and go to the Midwest. That lake effect band is just going to be the start of winter weather season for you guys, and I think this is going to be a very intense and very powerful winter weather season for you guys in the Midwest. It's going to be a much more likely chance that you're going to get some pretty significant snowstorms across much of the region right here, and you're going to want to pay attention to forecasting. You're going to want to pay attention to the climatology. At least in terms of the climatological data, number one, we're in a La Nina. La Ninas favor more snowstorms for parts of the Midwest and other portions of the United States that I'll get to a little bit later. That's the first thing. Number two, you're seeing more colder air from Canada than average coming in, particularly in December, January, and in parts of February. That is going to help your winter weather right there as well. You're also going to see a bit of an increase in moisture as well. You're seeing average to slightly below average, which that's not really too much of a concern for me, at least in terms of the climatological data. I've been looking at a few other things as well, but I do see the Midwest getting hammered pretty hard this winter weather from snowstorms, from ice potentially, especially in parts of southern Illinois. Indianapolis could see an ice storm potentially this season. That's a big concern of mine, but you're going to want to pay attention to it. In terms of the amount of snowfall, I would say that, let's just run it down real quickly. In terms of the amount of snowfall, like, it's going to vary very greatly, but I do see potentially at least a few 12-plus inch snowstorms hitting multiple areas at once. Like, not areas at once, but areas multiple times this season. Like, I could see Chicago seeing at least 2 or 3 snowstorms that aren't lake effect produce over a foot of snow. St. Louis, I could definitely see that as well. Indianapolis, I'd say you get maybe 1 or 2 snowstorms that could give you 6+ inches of snow. Michigan, I could definitely see a lot more snow than average this year, especially for those who are affected by the lakes, like Lake Michigan, Lake Huron. Lake effect's definitely going to increase this year, in my opinion, based on all the moisture that we have, as well as the fact that the water temperatures, too, are much warmer than average. In fact, Ethan actually sent me this over. I'm going to go ahead and pull this up and show you guys this. For your lake effect snow nerds right here, here's your water temperatures. In Lake Michigan, you're looking at over 3 degrees Celsius warmer than average. That's what's generating so much snow for a winter storm for lake effect that's happening in November. And if these ensembles hold, not ensembles, if these anomalies hold and they continue to increase because the lake doesn't cool down, and especially with temperatures going back up to the 50s and 60s in parts of the Midwest, you're going to see a situation where the lakes do not cool off, and that's going to generate more lake effect. Now, you're probably wondering, Patrick, how does lake effect get generated? So, just quick meteorology for you guys. That lake effect is generated when you have warm waters in Lake Michigan evaporate and start to rise up and clash with cooler air aloft, and that produces convection, and the wind will carry it to the south or the southeast or the southwest, depending on where it goes, and then it produces snow. That's your general gist of it right here. It happens when warm Lake Michigan waters or Lake Superior or Great Lakes waters in general kind of meet very cold Arctic air, and it allows for the water to evaporate and to rise into the atmosphere and basically produce a bunch of snow for you guys. So that's what you're looking at. And if you see these ensembles continue for the Great Lakes, that's really going to ramp up your snow totals, especially with the CANSIPs forecasting colder than average temperatures across much of the region as well. That's really going to ramp up your snow totals if you're in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, if you're in Wisconsin, if you're all throughout Michigan, if you're in northwestern Indiana, if you're in Ohio, Pennsylvania, especially Buffalo, New York. I could definitely see you guys seeing similar snowfall to what you had in 2022. That's my opinion based on. So please don't quote me. This is all taken for a grain of salt. That's just my take based on the forecasting things that I have for you guys. But overall, the Midwest is looking at a very active winter, and I would not be surprised if we see multiple snowstorms in the region, getting over a foot of snow that impact the same areas like Chicago or Detroit or St. Louis or Des Moines or any of those areas right there. Now shifting over further to the west, we're going to go ahead and go to the Great Plains. Here's your Great Plains forecast for you guys right here. Here's what we got for going on. So for the Great Plains, it's going to be a bit tougher to forecast because some of it is above average, some of it's below average in terms of its temperature, but I would say you're going to definitely see some pretty intense snowstorms if you're in Nebraska, if you're in Kansas, Oklahoma as well. I wouldn't necessarily say it's going to be too much of a deviation one way or another, but I will say that it definitely could be a starting point, definitely a setup point for some pretty extreme winter weather that could impact the Midwest. I do see a situation where mountainous regions could definitely see some more snowfall than average based on all the factors I mentioned previously. Now we're going to go ahead and go to the southern plains, particularly Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, that region right there. I don't necessarily see Texas getting more snowfall than average unless you're in the Panhandle. Pretty much anywhere north of Dallas, or south of Dallas rather, I wouldn't say you're going to see an increase of snowfall this year compared to the climatological mean. Now, what does that mean? It means some areas in Texas are probably not going to see snowfall this year. A lot of Texas is not going to see snowfall this year. My main concern for those areas, though, is once again the icing threat, and that's something we'll pay attention to. I talked about it in the Deep South section of this video. I'm not going to rehash that. And now shifting over to the mountainous regions. Over here, I would say the mountainous regions definitely are going to see some more snowfall than average this year. Matter of fact, let's go ahead and show you what we see for the short-term forecast just for in the next 2 weeks right here. You're looking at more snowfall, especially across parts of Colorado, Utah. The Sierra Nevada mountains are going to get hammered once again. That's not really that surprising because of the Pineapple Express and the West Coast systems that happen especially with California and those areas right there. We'll talk about that in a second, but you're gonna start seeing quite a lot of snowfall if you're in Colorado, if you're in Utah, if you're in other parts as well, if you're in parts of Idaho. Like, you're gonna see a lot of snowfall starting to really pile up in the next couple of weeks, and it's gonna be probably a pretty long winter, especially if those low pressure systems come in with that Arctic cold air that's forecasted for a lot of these regions right here, much colder than what we saw last year and much colder than average as well. You're in for a long winter. In terms of the amount of snow you're going to get, I can't quantify that because that depends on the elevation, depends on a lot of other factors, but I will say expect more snow than average this year. And now we're going to go ahead and tune into the West Coast, and the West Coast is going to be interesting because I'm not necessarily forecasting there's going to be like snow per se or anything like that, but more so I'm forecasting the rainy season that's going to be happening in California, Oregon, and in Washington as well. It's going to be a bit tough to forecast, but I do think we're going to see a bit more moisture than average in parts of Washington and Oregon, and drier than average anomalies in parts of California. And the reason for that is because of those troughs and ridges, and because the fact we're in a La Nina. La Nina typically supports more the low pressure systems heading towards moving in from Washington and Oregon, and not California as much. Northern California is definitely going to get quite a bit of rainfall for sure, but ultimately I would say that I would expect a drier than average season for parts of California right there compared to what we saw last year, and compared to, last year was already pretty dry, but especially compared to what we've seen previously. But I will say California is a unique threat because I would say that their big threat is not wildfires, but flash flooding. So if you do see a lot of those rain events happen, you're going to be careful of the flash flooding. I do think the flash flooding threat is still going to be very prevalent. I just don't know how prevalent it's going to be this year compared to the climatological mean. But that's something we'll have to pay attention to, and we'll keep you updated here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this forecast and this discussion right here. I really hope you guys enjoyed it, and I know I haven't been around the last couple of weeks. I've just been taking care of myself. I was also traveling as well, so I was busy doing my own stuff. I've been kind of mainly taking a step back to kind of work on myself, work on my physical health, and just, get ready for this winter season, because I think this is going to be a pretty exciting winter season, and I'm excited to cover this winter for you guys as well. And we have a lot of new things at Storms United that we're going to be using as well. We're going to bring Storm Code back. John's ramping that up right now. We're also going to be bringing a few other features as well. And I'm really excited to unveil what we're going to do this winter season. So with that being said, we're going to wrap it up right here. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. If you'd like to help out, hang out, or ask us questions, feel free to join the Storms United Discord server. The link to that is in the end screen. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.